In thinking about the content of tonight's speech, I decided that I'm going to skip the usual stuff. At this point, to be honest with you, I see no point in trying to repeat the list of all the horrible things that Iran's regime has done and continues to do. I don't need to tell you about the gender and religious apartheid, the killings, the torture, the corruption, the environmental degradation, the transnational repression, the shooting of an airplane, the terrorism, and so on. If you're here, you already know all that. I instead want to deliver two messages to two slightly different but overlapping audiences. The first is a message to those who are from outside the Iranian community, or perhaps those that are in the community who have ties and links to people of influence in politics in Canada and elsewhere. And the message that I have for them is simple. The people of Iran have shown remarkable courage, the kind of courage that I have to admit I lack, and perhaps you might even lack. They've shown this incredible courage to make their preferences known. Their preference is an end to the Islamic Republic. No ifs, no buts, no laters, no let's try to reform this. Their demand is clear, and their demand is just. Now it's the world's turn to help them. There's a lie that some people tell when we talk about helping Iran's people. They say that what we're asking for is for the world to send the military to Iran. There's a particularly pernicious lie that spread on social media saying that we're asking NATO to set up no-fly zones in Iran, that we're asking the West to step in and free us. Nothing is further from the truth. We're not asking for any of that. What we're asking for is for the world to help Iranians free themselves. Iran is their country, and this is their revolution. It's for them to overthrow their oppressors. But the world's democracies can be their allies. In a few days, some of us in this room are going to go to Ottawa to ask members of parliament to adopt policies that will help Iran's people. These demands are concrete, and they will actually help. First, we're asking, and I hope you will ask, that the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps be listed as a terror group, an organization whose role is to repress people at home and carry out terror attacks abroad is a terror group. An organization that shoots a civilian airplane and refuses to hold anyone accountable is a terror group. The US recognizes it as a terror group. The Prime Minister of this country and the Deputy Prime Minister have said that it's a terror group, but we need our laws to reflect that. We should obviously exempt people who were forced to serve in the IRGC as part of their mandatory service, but otherwise we should list them. Secondly, we're asking the government to open its doors to more Iranian asylum seekers. Those who fight for freedom in Iran are very, very vulnerable. They often face a choice between being killed inside the country or escaping to a nearby country where they often can't work and where they're vulnerable to being extradited at any moment. Canada should do the right thing and allow these brave activists to find a home here. This is especially important when so many members of the Iranian-Canadian community see that regime affiliates can freely come to Canada and buy expensive homes. Those affiliates should be kicked out, and the human rights defenders should be allowed in. There are other policies that we want, and I won't list them all here. The point, to those of you who are in and around politicians, is to call on them to support Iran's people. Supportive tweets are good, but not making a deal with this regime is better. Expressions of solidarity are good, but not giving the regime $6 billion in ransom payments is actually better. Attending our protests is good, but actual policies that help the people and pressure the regime are even better. Now, I said that I want to deliver two messages to two different audiences, and that was one. My second message is to many of you, Iranians who consider themselves, even though they're far from the country, to be part of the revolutionary movement. And my message is this. The Mehsa revolution is a fight for freedom, equality, and pluralism. It's important that we preserve that character and not allow the revolution to be usurped by those who are chauvinists, those who want to drown out voices that are different than theirs, and those who want to replace one type of autocracy with another type. This revolution is about creating a democratic system. In recent months, unfortunately, we've seen the rise of extremists in this revolution. As extremists often do, they wrap themselves in the flag and call themselves patriots. There's nothing wrong with loving your flag and being a patriot. But what's dangerous is a brand of nationalism that defines the nation along very, very narrow lines. It's important that at this early stage we combat this kind of thinking. We need to ensure that when we talk about a nation, we define it as a place where the right, the left, the constitutional monarchists, the Republicans, the religious, the atheists, the traditionalists, the LGBTQ community, those who want federalism, those who want a centralized government, all of them should have a place in your definition of a nation. You may have seen in recent months an effort, both in real life but very much online and almost certainly helped by the regime's cyber army, to attack anyone who dares to challenge one particular vision of what the future should look like. There's an endless stream of vile lies and threats and character assassination directed at people who have fought this regime for years, but who think that our revolution isn't simply to restore what existed before 1979. And some of those who hold these extreme views, unfortunately, aren't just obscure Twitter users. They're well-known people who talk about hanging opponents from trees immediately after the revolution. They post, and we heard this question just before this, they post, death to the left on social media. They're the people who kick up a fuss when in Canada's parliament, someone, Dr. Ismailioun, talks about the victims of the 1988 massacre, saying, why are we bothering to talk about them? This is a really dangerous vision, even if it happens to be expressed by people who are dressed in fashionable clothes. The solution to this, I think, is for moderates to come together and articulate their vision of what a future Iran will look like. An Iran in which everyone is free to engage in political activity, whatever that political activity is, as long as they do so without resort to violence or threats of violence. An Iran in which there is actual free speech, not just free speech for people who happen to agree with me. An Iran in which we don't worship people or families, but are allowed to examine their actions critically. And I think we, the moderates, and I think there are a lot of us, even though our voices are not quite as loud, especially in the virtual world, we need to take back symbols and words that the extremists are trying to usurp. They want to pretend that the flag is theirs, that the word patriotic is theirs. We can't allow this to happen. We must not be shy. The flag belongs to all of us, and anyone who loves that country and wants to see it improve is a patriot. And we must denounce, openly and without fear, the intimidation and bullying by extremists. Our revolution is for democracy and for rights, and it must be fought for with those same values. There's no room for thuggery, intimidation, character assassination, and the idea that if you're not with me, you're a counter-revolutionary. We are, ladies and gentlemen, in a revolutionary period. We're fighting one of the most vicious and violent regimes on earth, but we will prevail because our cause is just and our resolve is strong. We need to ask the help of Western politicians that share our democratic values. We need to stand united with those who share the democratic spirit of our movement. And we need to do all we can to support those who are giving their lives for a better future. No matter what slogan they try to pass off as the slogan of this revolution, I continue to repeat: woman, life, freedom, zan, zindagi, azadi. That's what
that you mentioned, and also the Twitter space. How much of it do you think is the cyber army enabling the extremists and making their voices louder, and how much of it do you think is disinformation or possible active measures that we are seeing online? Because from what we see in the community, most of us are moderate, we have moderate views, but we only see, at least on the cyberspace, at least on Twitter, Instagram, all these extremist groups, and the belief, at least in your community, is a lot of it is the cyber army enabling those voices and making those voices louder. So what do you think we can do about that as a community, especially like the diaspora community? How can we help that?
I think the vast majority of what you see online, frankly, is disinformation in the cyber army. And the proof of it is just last week. I mean, the moderates had a protest and tens of thousands came out. And the extremists had tried to have protests and they were basically a flop. But, I mean, you obviously have to ask why there's a particular political movement whose message is so easily co-opted by the cyber army, right? That's an important question to ask. But this is the issue. When you ask what can we do, Ms. Mohiuddin, whom I hold in incredibly high regard, is one of my favorite people in the world. She said to ignore it, but I actually disagree. I think the solution requires moral courage. When you hear people being attacked, you need to stand up and say enough. The reason this works is because they attack me daily, and some of you that follow me on social media know this. They attack me daily, calling me a communist, a mujahid, a this, a that. And everybody backs away from me. And the reason for that is nobody wants to also get mud on them. And that's why this movement succeeds. It's because they attack Hamid and nobody stands up for him because they don't want to get mud on him. The way this is going to end is for people to stand up and say enough of this bullshit. That's a great question. I don't know. I mean, I think really all it is, courage is one of those things that you build up by practicing it. You stand up and, some time ago, again, I get accused of being a mujahid all the time. One of the least popular positions I've ever taken was a couple months ago when there was an attack on the Mujahideen base in Albania. I was the only one, I think, probably on social media that stood up and said, this is outrageous. Not because I support this organization, but because democratic rights would require that everyone have the right to participate in political activity. Nobody stood up, but I think a lot of people quietly told me they agreed with me. Well, why don't you stand up? There is comfort in numbers, and the more you practice this, the more you realize the world doesn't end when people attack you online. Once you realize that, once enough people stand up, this whole culture will change.
این انقلاب مهسا شروع شده و این اختلافایی که ایجاد شده برای من حس زمانی رو داره که اوایل انقلاب بود و مثلا اگر آدم‌ها تو خونه‌شون مشروب می‌خوردن یا دیگری داشتن نباید به کسی میگفتن. الان اینطوریه که مثلا اگه ما بیایم و مثلا از شما یا از آقای اسماعیلیون حرف خوب بزنیم همه می‌خوان آدم‌ها اتک بکنن. توی اینستاگرامش هست، توی فیسبوکش هست، توی زندگی واقعی سر میز شام که شما با دوستاتون میشید اونجا هم اتک میشید و شما فرمودید که نباید مثلا بکاپ کنید و باید وایسید و من خودم به شخص این کار میکنم و میدونم افرادی هستن که وای میسن ولی فکر میکنم ما آدم ها به خاطر اینکه یک جمهوری اسلامی وجود داشته و یک دیکتاتوری داشته ماها یک جوری دیکتاتور شدیم که همون صحبتی که آقای اسماعیلیون میکردن که باید گفتگو کنیم و این گفتگو توی کشور به افراد آموزش داده نشده. مثلا شما خودتون که تحصیل کرده هستید اینجا رفتید دانشگاه دیبیت داشتید اینا رو هیچکدوم توی ایران به افراد آموزش نمیدن و خیلی از افراد هم اینجا این آموزش ها ندیدن. واسه همین من بگم یک فضای گفتمانی شکل نمیگیره و جز اینکه بخوان افراد فحاشی کنن و همدیگه و توهین کنن کار نمیشه کرد و من احساس میکنم که خودم حافظ شدم توی این قضیه و خیلی خوشحال میشم که نظر شما رو
If you don't mind, I'll answer in English. It's just easier for me. I think you're absolutely right. Look, there's not this culture of liberalism. Liberalism isn't just a bunch of institutions. It's also a spirit. It's also an outlook on the world. I don't know if you've ever read Havel, but he has this famous essay about the green grocer. In the communist country, he runs a grocery shop. And he doesn't believe in the system, right? He thinks this is all stupid. But he puts up a sign saying workers of the world unite because it's just easier that way. You just put up that sign in your window and they'll leave you alone. Getting over dictatorship means getting over the desire to put up that sign so they will leave you alone. You said, you will face conflicts, people will attack you. Well, so what? They attack me every day, I'm still here, right? Stand up, stop being afraid.
I'm just sitting here and I'm amazed because when you and I went here, an organization like this didn't exist. In fact, it was the complete opposite. You had students who were part of the reform movement, students who were constantly telling us that we're out of touch and we don't know anything. So I'm just, as a personal question, I'm asking, when you're standing here looking at all these students and seeing this organization come about, what does that tell you about where we are today?
Oh, what a great question. I'm obviously elated. I've been, like you, I've just assigned to a minority my whole life, right? I've just been the one voice often in the university setting, whatever, saying this reform stuff is nonsense. And I'm glad that people have gotten here. But obviously, the fight is not over because now you've got a different form of extremism. And it's still kind of lonely, but all you can do, again, I keep going back to my social media activity, I have as my pinned tweet on Twitter an expression from a famous Soviet dissident, Solzhenitsyn, live not by lies, live with truth. That's all you can do, is you can just tell the truth and the world eventually, I think, catches up with you. As that old saying about the arc of history is long but it bends towards justice, it'll get there eventually. All you can do is stand up and tell the truth.
اسلامی رو پیدا کردیم توی کانادا که توی پروژه‌های خاصی توی به جمهوری اسلامی دارن کمک می‌کنن. چرا کار شما فکر می‌کنید وجود داره؟ یا هستش که ما اینا رو بتونیم به شما معرفی کنیم و اینا شما به دولت معرفی کنیم که اینا میشه از حداقل کانادا برسیم دنیا
100%. یکی از خواسته های ما، گفتم ما راهی اتاوا هستیم، یکی از خواسته های ما از دولت همینه که ما میدونیم افراد جمهوری اسلامی اینجا در کانادا هستن، دارن فعالیت میکنن و به ما یه راهی بدیم که مردم عادی بتونن با دولت، با سیستم امنیتی اینجا و اطلاعاتی اینجا تماس بگیرن. فعلا متاسفانه این وجود نداره. خوشحال میشم با هم صحبت بکنیم، من میتونم این اطلاعات رو بدم، اما خواسته ما اینه که باید یه حالت سیستماتیک ما بتونیم این خواسته رو دولت بدیم. So two things. One, sometimes people tell me, stop tweeting and focus on real stuff. So two things. One, I don't think you should abandon Twitter. The information space is incredibly important, which is why the regime spends so much time and energy trying to capture the information space. So I would urge all of you, if you're not on the information space, get on there. I don't think it's a waste of time. It's an important form of resistance. But that can't be your only activity. So, I have been, for my part, I'm just one person, but I've managed to join up with a bunch of other people, some of whom are in this room, and we created a small little organization. We didn't make a big announcement, whatever. It's just called the Iranian Justice Collective, and we started doing little things quietly. We started getting politicians from all around the world to sponsor political prisoners, and I think that saved some lives. We fought, and I think we've been successful in getting some refugees to come to this country. We don't celebrate it, we don't, hold a parade in our honor, but we do this stuff. So I think all you need to do is either start an organization or find one that you believe in and just get in contact with them and say, I want to join and I want to help you. We need all the help we can get. We need all the resources we can get. So I see a certain degree of, well, there's nothing we can do. There's actually a ton that you can do as an individual, but you just have to link up with people who are similarly minded. Anyway, thank you all so much.